Welcome to DragonFire, Valerian Space Venture's daily news show on everything happening in the new space economy. We'll start off with Valar Atomics, one of our portfolio companies. They recently announced that they achieved cold criticality at their Nevada testing site, along with Los Alamos Labs for the project named Nova. Cold criticality is when a reactor achieves a self-sustaining chain reaction of uranium-235, but at a very low power, without heat removal, letting engineers validate the core technology of it without turning it into a real power plant. This means that Valar is the first startup to achieve cold criticality and puts them a step closer to their Ward 250 power reactor, which plans to begin operations under the DOE's Advanced Reactor Pilot Program, dedicated to things like hydrogen, synthetic fuels, and to generate all the energy needed for these AI data centers. This will also be how energy-hungry space and defense infrastructure get powered in the future. Next up, let's talk about Aerodrive. So Aerodrive is a startup that spun out of the Slab Laboratory at Stanford. They recently raised a $5.3 million seed round, which will be used to scale production of the self-driving Era satellite module. The module combines comms, AI, as well as sensors to provide satellites with self-driving technology stacks. This allows satellites to perceive their surroundings as well as move in ways autonomously to avoid satellite collisions or any debris that would be in orbit. It also allows for rendezvous and proximity operations. The company already has $1 million NASA contract and plans to have hundreds to thousands of these modules in space, turning satellites into a distributed sensor network for space traffic. And the long-term vision is essentially Waymo for orbit. Use a collection of on-orbit sensors and autonomy to avoid collisions while also increasing the scope of missions that satellites can conduct, all while providing very important situational awareness across LEO. And this brings us to why does this autonomy matter? SpaceX recently announced that a Chinese satellite came very close to impacting one of their Starlink satellites in orbit. In fact, it was so close it was on the order of a couple hundred meters. According to SpaceX, they got no heads up from the Chinese government. They got no telemetry data, nothing of the sort. So they had no idea until they had their own sensors notice the satellite, and then they had to make their own maneuvers to avoid it. And this is a textbook example of what we're seeing in orbit today. There's more satellites, there's more objects, and then there's more movement. We've seen LEO to GEO transfers, but we need to be able to understand how we can avoid each other once we're in orbit. And incidents like this will only strengthen the need for government oversight, but also for technological innovation to make sure the satellites don't cross paths too closely. And another recent funding round out of California, Ford Astra's recently raised $8 million for government and defense satellites. The company was founded by former SpaceX engineers, and the company plans to build satellites with remote sensing, autonomous guidance, and effectors that allow them to get close to and even disable adversarial satellites. The company's thesis is that as space gets more crowded and as becomes the high ground for the modern warfighter, we need to protect our most valuable government and defense satellites. So Ford Astra's satellites become guardians for the important satellite assets we have in orbit. And the same technology used for the defense, the fine-grained sensors, mobility, as well as effectors, can be used in lower stakes missions, such as inspection, servicing, and debris mitigation, which blurs the line between commercial and defense assets in space. Finally, on a lighter note, the Space Force has just announced a new naming convention for each of their teams. They're leaning into imagery like playing cards, Norse mythology, as well as snakes and other things of the like. Orbital warfare will be taking names from Norse mythology. Electromagnetic warfare will come from snakes. Space domain awareness assets will be ghosts. Navigation warfare, those will be sharks. Satellite comms will get constellation names. Missile warfare and tracking will get Sentinel and Guardian names. So on the surface, this will bring identity and a spirit de corps to a relatively young part of the Defense Department, similar to how the Navy and Air Force have names for each of their assets. But by picking names from ghosts, sharks, and Norse mythology, it tells us how the Space Force wants to be seen publicly, but also by new recruits. Stealthy, persistent, but also very ready for potential conflicts in orbit. So that's a wrap for DragonFire today. We covered Valar's first nuclear heartbeat, a few raises that happened in the industry, Space Force's rebranding, as well as SpaceX and their near miss with a Chinese satellite.